The Black community has given the world legends, voices, visionaries, and dreamers whose light inspired generations. But behind the fame and applause, some faced a cruel and silent enemy that stole them far too soon. AIDS, one of the deadliest epidemics in modern history, didn't just take lives, it shattered dreams, silenced voices, and left families and fans grieving across the world. Among its victims were Black stars whose brilliance once lit up every stage they touched. Today, we remember 23 of those unforgettable icons, souls lost to a disease that changed history. Which of their stories will touch your heart the most? Stay with us as we uncover the powerful and heartbreaking journeys of Black celebrities taken too soon by AIDS. Howard Rollins wasn't just an actor, he was a storm of brilliance wrapped in quiet intensity. Born in 1950 in Baltimore, he rose from humble beginnings to captivate audiences across America. His very first film role didn't just impress critics, it earned him an Academy Award nomination, announcing to the world that a new powerhouse had arrived. Rollins had that rare gift. He didn't just play characters, he became them. Every look, every word, carried a kind of truth that left audiences breathless. By 1988, he was at the height of his fame, starring in the acclaimed TV drama In the Heat of the Night. But behind the fame and flashing lights, another story unfolded, a darker one. Haunted by addiction and personal demons, Rollins found himself in a battle no script could save him from. The arrests, the scandals, the whispers, they chipped away at the man who once seemed unstoppable. Eventually, he was let go from the very show that had made him a star. As the years passed, the spotlight dimmed. Rollins retreated into solitude, quietly fighting his pain. Then came the final heartbreak. In 1996, he was diagnosed with AIDS, and just 6 weeks later, he was gone. On December 8, 1996, at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in New York City, Howard Rollins took his final bow. He was only 46. A life of brilliance, consumed too soon by tragedy. His story reminds us how fragile greatness can be, and how even the brightest lights can fade before their time. So tell me, what do you feel when you hear Howard Rollins' story? And whose untold story should we uncover next? Raymond St. Jacques wasn't just an actor, he was a pioneer who rode straight into history. As the first Black man to hold a regular role in a Western TV series, he shattered barriers in a genre built on white heroes and untold exclusions. His mere presence on screen wasn't just representation, it was quiet rebellion. For over 3 decades, St. Jacques dominated both stage and screen, earning the nickname, the Man of 1,000 Faces, for his uncanny ability to disappear into any character he played. To young Black actors, he was a symbol of courage, grace, and unbreakable will. But behind that strength lived a truth that Hollywood and America wasn't ready to face. Raymond St. Jacques was gay. In an era when authenticity could destroy a career, his honesty came at a painful cost. His engagement ended the moment his truth surfaced, and from then on, whispers followed him wherever he went. In August 1990, at just 60 years old, he died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. The official report listed lymphoma, but years later, his wife revealed the heartbreaking truth. His death was caused by AIDS-related complications. That revelation forever changed how his legacy was remembered, not as a man defeated, but as one silenced too soon. His story stands as both triumph and tragedy, and it leads to one haunting question. How did the next name on this list face the same merciless fate? Larry Riley wasn't just another actor, he was a spark of life wrapped in talent and soul. Born in 1952, Riley carried a rare kind of magnetism that drew people in before he even spoke. Audiences remember him best as C.J. Memphis in A Soldier's Story, a performance that revealed not only his dramatic power but his heart, tender, raw, and unforgettable. Yet his artistry didn't stop there. Behind the camera, he was a gifted singer and musician whose voice carried the warmth of a man who had lived deeply and felt everything. His journey began on stage in 1971, where he carved out a steady path through theater and television, lighting up every room he entered with that easy smile and effortless charm. But beyond the spotlight, Riley battled demons that few ever saw. In 1989, he checked into rehab, determined to face his struggles with addiction. Then, a year later, came the devastating truth: he was HIV positive. He told almost no one. Not his co-stars. Not the press. Only his wife knew the secret that haunted him. As his health began to fade, Riley told others he was suffering from kidney failure. And still, he worked, showing up, performing, smiling, refusing to let illness steal his purpose. When he passed away in 1992 at just 40 years old, the public was told it was cancer. Only later did his doctor reveal the truth. It leaves us with a haunting question: was Larry protecting his peace, or protecting a world still afraid of the truth? And how many others, like him, have carried their pain in silence just to be remembered for their light? Alvin Ailey wasn't just a dancer, he was a force of nature. A visionary who took the beauty, pain, and power of black artistry and placed it on the world's grandest stages. His journey began under the watchful eye of Thelma Robinson, a Dunham-trained dancer who taught him how movement could carry emotion deeper than words. From that moment, Ailey devoted his life to mastering every rhythm, every style, until he forged a language of his own, one that spoke to the soul. But behind the brilliance was a man wrestling with identity. As his fame grew, he refused to be confined to labels, not just a black choreographer, but a universal artist whose work echoed the human spirit itself. Away from the spotlight, Ailey battled demons the public never saw. He was both gay and bipolar, living in quiet torment even as his art inspired millions. On December 1, 1989, the world lost him to an AIDS-related illness at just 58 years old. In a final act of love and protection, he asked his doctor to say he'd died of a rare blood disorder, to spare his mother the cruelty of stigma. Yet no lie could ever bury the truth of his legacy. Alvin Ailey reshaped the meaning of dance, turning movement into freedom, rhythm into revelation. His spirit still moves through every dancer who dares to tell their story through motion. So tell us, how did Alvin Ailey's fearless artistry change the way you see the world? Stay tuned as we reveal the next trailblazer who redefined what it means to move. Max Robinson wasn't just a journalist, he was a force of change. As the co-anchor of ABC World News Tonight, he didn't just read the news, he made history, becoming the first African American to ever hold such a position on a major U.S. network. Before that, he broke barriers in Washington, D.C. as the first black anchor at WRC-TV. His deep, commanding voice carried truth. His presence on screen shattered stereotypes. To millions, he was a symbol of progress, confident, brilliant, unstoppable. But behind that groundbreaking image was a tragedy few knew. In 1983, a horrific car crash nearly ended his life. He survived, but the blood transfusion that saved him carried a hidden killer. Back then, blood wasn't screened for HIV. Without knowing it, Robinson had been infected, a silent enemy that would slowly, cruelly take everything from him. Years later, when pneumonia sent him to the hospital, doctors confirmed his worst fear: he had AIDS. Yet Robinson chose silence. In a time when stigma was deadlier than the disease itself, he told no one publicly. Even as his health failed, he carried that secret with quiet dignity. In December 1988, while preparing to speak at Howard University, his alma mater, his body finally gave out. He was only 49. Max Robinson's story is both triumphant and heartbreaking. He opened doors for generations of black journalists, yet bore a private pain the world would never see. His life still asks an unshakable question: when the truth could destroy you, would you speak it, or die in silence as he did? Willi Smith, the genius the fashion world lost too soon. Born in 1948, he shattered barriers as one of the first African-American designers to conquer the global stage. In 1976, he launched Willi Wear Limited, a brand that redefined style, bold, streetwise, and accessible to everyone, not just the elite. His clothes carried the rhythm of the city, alive, expressive, and unapologetically free. But success often hides sorrow. In early 1987, while traveling through India on a fabric-buying trip, Smith fell mysteriously ill. By the time he returned to New York, his body was failing him. On April 16th, he was rushed to Mount Sinai Medical Center, suffering from pneumonia and shigellosis. Within just 24 hours, the fashion world lost one of its brightest lights. He was only 39. At first, doctors blamed pneumonia. But his attorney, Edward Hayes, later revealed the heartbreaking truth: Willi's death was AIDS-related. He reportedly had no idea he was even infected. The disease had been silent, hidden behind the glamour, until that final hospitalization. His passing sent shockwaves through the fashion community. Willi Smith wasn't just a designer, he was a movement. A visionary who brought color, culture, and inclusivity to an industry that desperately needed it. He was gone far too soon, but his influence still walks every runway. So tell me, who do you think deserves to be remembered next on this list of legends? Emotional and cinematic. Bobby DeBarge, a name that once echoed with pure soul and velvet harmony. Born in 1956, he wasn't just a singer, he was a force. As the angelic lead voice of the R&B group Switch, Bobby soared under Motown's golden banner, turning every stage into magic and every note into fire. But behind the bright lights and applause, his life told a far darker story. In his youth, Bobby slipped into the seductive trap of drugs. What began as a way to escape soon became a prison of heroin, reckless choices, and broken dreams. By the mid-1980s, the glitter of Los Angeles hit a dangerous underworld, one where needles were passed like secrets. In that shadowed moment, Bobby's fate changed forever. HIV found its way into his veins. He kept his pain hidden until prison walls forced honesty. It was there, behind bars, that he revealed the truth to his family, a confession that shattered hearts. Years later, as his body weakened, his loved ones rushed him to a hospital in Grand Rapids. On August 16, 1995, at only 39 years old, Bobby DeBarge's brilliant light faded, claimed by complications from AIDS. His story is a chilling reminder of how easily fame can turn to tragedy, how the same world that cheers you on can also lead you to the edge. So, what do you think? Were these stars victims of their own choices, or of an industry that feeds on them? And more hauntingly, who's next on the list? Essex Hemphill wasn't just a poet. He was a revolutionary voice wrapped in rhythm and truth. Born in 1957, he began writing at just 14, turning his private struggles, his family's pain, and his identity into raw, unfiltered art. His words cut through silence like a blade, demanding to be heard. From anthologies to films and documentaries, Hemphill's voice became a cornerstone of the Black arts movement, unapologetic, brilliant, and fiercely alive. On stage, his spoken word was electric, a heartbeat of defiance and beauty. He spoke of race, desire, and identity at a time when those truths were dangerous to say out loud. Even as he lived with AIDS, Hemphill refused to let illness define his story. For years, his silence about his condition became its own act of rebellion, a protest against pity. But in 1994, he shattered that silence with a gut-wrenching poem, laying bare his personal war with the disease. A year later, in November 1995, that powerful voice fell quiet forever. He was only 38, yet the echo of his words still challenges us. If more had spoken openly about AIDS back then, could the stigma and the silence have died sooner? And if not him, then who among us will be brave enough to speak now? Fela Kuti wasn't just another musician, he was a revolution wrapped in rhythm. Born in 1938, this Nigerian icon didn't simply create Afrobeat, he ignited it, a fearless fusion of West African percussion, American funk, and free-flowing jazz that shook the foundations of both music and politics. For Fela, sound was a weapon, not a melody, a battle cry for the oppressed, a sermon for freedom. In 1978, he shocked the world by marrying 27 women in a single ceremony, a bold act that perfectly mirrored his rebellious spirit. The son of Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, one of Nigeria's fiercest women's rights activists, Fela was born to defy authority. With his band, Africa 70, he became the heartbeat of a movement, electrifying crowds while exposing the rot of corruption through his searing lyrics and relentless activism. But even the fiercest storms fade. In August 1997, the world fell silent as news broke that Fela had died of heart failure caused by AIDS complications. His brother, Dr. Olakoya Ransome Kuti, a respected physician and AIDS advocate, delivered the devastating announcement. The loss sent shockwaves through Nigeria and across the world. Fela's life was a collision of music, rebellion, and raw truth, a thunderstorm of courage that refused to bow to power. And though his body is gone, his spirit still roars in every Afrobeat rhythm that makes the world move today. So tell me, who do you think is next on this legendary list? Marlon Riggs, the man who refused to stay silent. Born in 1957 and raised under the Texas sun, Marlon was more than just a filmmaker. He was a poet, a teacher, and a revolutionary voice for those the world tried to erase. Through groundbreaking documentaries like Ethnic Notions and Tongues Untied, Riggs dared to show what others were too afraid to see: the beauty, pain, and pride of Black gay men in a society that often rejected both their color and their truth. But behind that fierce brilliance was a private storm. In 1988, Riggs was diagnosed with HIV, a secret he shared only with his partner, Jacques Vincent. For 6 long years, he kept creating, kept teaching, and kept fighting, even as his body began to fade. On April 5, 1994, at just 37 years old, Marlon Riggs passed away quietly at home, Jacques holding his hand. The cause? Complications from AIDS. Yet his legacy didn't die with him. It lives in every artist who dares to speak truth, in every soul who refuses to be silenced. Do you think Marlon was right to keep his diagnosis private? And more importantly, who's next on our list? Alan Wiggins wasn't just another player on a baseball lineup, he was lightning in motion. A gifted second baseman and outfielder for the San Diego Padres, his speed could turn an ordinary game into something electric. He read the field like poetry in motion, stealing bases and hearts with equal precision. But beyond the roar of the crowd, Alan was fighting an invisible war, one far more ruthless than any opponent across the diamond. Addiction stalked him like a shadow, dragging him through arrests, suspensions, and a devastating trade in 1985 that sent him from San Diego to Baltimore. For a while, he fought to stay in the game, but the battles off the field proved heavier than any glove he'd ever worn. When baseball finally slipped away, another cruel fight began, this time for his life. Diagnosed with AIDS, Alan Wiggins became the first Major League Baseball player known to die from the disease. In late 1990, his health collapsed. Pneumonia and tuberculosis ravaged his body as he lay in Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, barely conscious, whispering the truth that his infection came from intravenous drug use. A month later, on January 6, 1991, his story came to its tragic close. He was just 32. A man once celebrated for his speed was ultimately outrun by fate. And as the lights dimmed on his story, one haunting question remained: who will be next on the list? Glenn Burke wasn't just another name in baseball history. He was a game-changer who paid the ultimate price for his truth. As an outfielder for the Los Angeles Dodgers and later the Oakland Athletics, Burke carried a secret Major League Baseball wasn't ready to face. Long before he publicly came out as gay in 1982, the rumors, the side glances, and the quiet punishments had already begun. The locker room whispers turned into barriers, and the pressure crushed a promising career after only 4 seasons. Off the field, Glenn searched for peace in a world that had turned its back on him. He played in local leagues for love of the game, but the emptiness drove him toward cocaine, his only escape from a reality that refused to accept him. In 1987, fate struck cruelly when a car accident shattered his leg and his dreams. From that point on, his life became a storm of pain, arrests, and homelessness, a fallen hero wandering the same streets where fans once cheered his name. By May 1995, Glenn Burke's battle came to an end. At just 42, he died of AIDS-related complications, his body weakened but his spirit unbroken. Today, his story stands as both a tragedy and a triumph, the legacy of a man who refused to hide, who lived authentically in a time when honesty came with a heavy price. Who will we uncover next? Another name who dared to defy the silence. Ron Richardson wasn't just an actor, he was a force of nature, a voice that could light up any stage. His journey began in the mid-1970s, in small regional theaters and opera houses, where he slowly shaped his craft and earned every ounce of applause. By 1978, he stepped onto Broadway for the first time, playing the chief of police, a modest role that marked the beginning of something extraordinary. Through the early 1980s, Richardson toured the country, breathing life into every character he touched. But it was in 1985 that his brilliance truly exploded. Cast as Jim in the Broadway musical Big River, Richardson delivered a performance so raw, so soul-stirring, it moved audiences to tears and critics to standing ovations. Awards followed, but more than that, he left a mark that could never be erased. Tragically, his shining light dimmed far too soon. On April 5, 1995, at only 43 years old, Ron Richardson passed away from AIDS-related complications in Bronxville, New York. His story is one of immense talent and heartbreaking loss, a reminder of how quickly greatness can fade. But whose story will take the spotlight next? Stay tuned. Kevin Peter Hall, born in 1955, wasn't just an actor, he was a towering force of nature. I'll never forget the first time I saw him step into the studio for a casting call. At 7 feet 2 inches tall, he didn't just enter a room, he filled it. Hollywood often saw his extraordinary height as a ticket to playing creatures and monsters, but those who knew him off camera saw something else entirely, a gentle, humble soul with a heart far larger than his frame. It was on the set of the sitcom 227 that fate intervened. There, Kevin met actress Elena Reed, and the spark between them was instant. What began as an on-screen connection soon blossomed into a real-life love story, art imitating life in its purest form. Kevin's career soared with Harry and the Hendersons, earning him recognition far beyond his imposing stature. But just as his star was rising, tragedy struck. Following a car accident, Kevin received a blood transfusion, one that unknowingly carried HIV. In an era before strict medical screenings, this mistake proved fatal. On April 10, 1991, just 1 month before his 36th birthday, Kevin Peter Hall passed away from AIDS-related pneumonia. His death devastated Hollywood and left behind a question that still echoes today. If better safeguards had existed, could this gentle giant's story have ended differently? Sylvester wasn't just a singer, he was an experience. A dazzling storm of soul, disco, and defiance wrapped in sequins and satin. With a voice that could shake the heavens and a presence that owned every room, Sylvester broke every rule that tried to contain him. At a time when being openly gay could end a career, he made it his crown. On stage, he didn't just perform music, he became it, radiating joy, pain, and liberation in every note. But behind the glitter was a story of love and loss. In 1982, he fell for Tom Daniels, a charming hairdresser whose laughter matched Sylvester's fire. Their romance was passionate but short-lived, undone by betrayal and distance. Then came Rick Kramer, a tall, gentle architect who steadied Sylvester's wild heart. Together they built a home in the Hollywood Hills, a sanctuary of love, art, and laughter. Yet, tragedy struck when Rick died of AIDS-related complications in 1987. A year later, the same illness claimed Sylvester himself. His body may have faded, but his spirit still pulses through every disco beat, a reminder that true brilliance never truly dies. Jermaine Stewart wasn't just another name in R&B. He was a symbol of joy, confidence, and rhythm. His 1986 hit, "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off," wasn't just a catchy tune. It was an anthem of self-respect and innocence in an era obsessed with excess. With his smooth voice and infectious charm, Jermaine gave the world a reason to dance and to think. But behind the glitter and groove, a quiet tragedy was unfolding. On March 17, 1997, at only 39 years old, Jermaine Stewart lost his battle with AIDS-related liver cancer in Homewood, Illinois. What followed was a heartbreak that went beyond death itself. His own family refused to pay for his burial or even mark his grave, a cruel reflection of the stigma that still surrounded homosexuality and AIDS in the 1990s. For 17 long years, Jermaine rested in silence, his grave unmarked, his name nearly erased by shame. It wasn't until 2014 that a headstone finally rose to honor the man who gave us a reason to celebrate life with dignity. It makes you wonder, if compassion had replaced prejudice back then, how many more lights like Jermaine's might still be shining today? Fonce Mizell was one half of the legendary Mizell brothers, the visionary duo that helped define the unmistakable sound of Motown and left their fingerprints on the soul of modern R&B and jazz. Born in 1943 in Harlem, New York, Fonce grew up surrounded by rhythm and melody, eventually perfecting his craft at Howard University. Inside the music industry, Fonce Mizell wasn't just known for making hits, he was revered for shaping the very language of groove. But behind the brilliance, shadows began to appear. By the late 1980s, quiet whispers followed him. Friends noticed the sudden weight loss, the fatigue, the unexplained disappearances from studio sessions. Then came the devastating truth. In 1989, it was revealed that Fonce was privately battling AIDS. At a time when fear and stigma silenced so many, he chose to carry his burden in silence. That July, in Los Angeles, the music world lost one of its quiet geniuses. He was just 46 years old. The records say prolonged illness, but those who truly knew him understood the courage behind his final days. Whose hidden story will we uncover next on this journey through the untold struggles behind the music that moved the world? Hank Gathers wasn't just another college basketball player, he was a storm in sneakers. As the unstoppable forward for Loyola Marymount, he didn't just play the game, he redefined it. In 1989, during his junior year, Gathers accomplished the unthinkable, leading the entire nation in both scoring and rebounding, a feat almost unheard of in NCAA history. Every time he took the court, he turned hardwood into electricity. Fans didn't just watch him, they felt him. But behind the thunderous dunks and deafening cheers, there was a quiet shadow. Rumors swirled, and whispers hinted at something the school refused to talk about: Hank's health. In December 1989, that shadow became real. He collapsed mid-game, and doctors diagnosed him with cardiomyopathy, a dangerous heart condition. Yet, Gathers refused to be defined by weakness. He pushed on, fearless, determined to finish what he started. Then came March 1990, a night that would haunt college basketball forever. Facing Portland in the conference tournament, Hank soared for one of his signature slams. The crowd erupted. But just seconds later, the unthinkable happened. He stumbled, then fell to the floor. The gym went silent. Efforts to save him failed. Hank Gathers was gone, only 23 years old, taken by cardiac arrest. In the days that followed, grief turned to questions, and questions to controversy. Darker rumors began to spread. Some claimed he had tested positive for HIV, a story his family fiercely denied. Still, the speculation lingered, leaving a haunting uncertainty. Could the tragedy that ended his life have been misunderstood? Or was there something deeper, hidden behind the silence that followed one of basketball's brightest lights? Willie Hutch, born William Richardson, wasn't just a singer, he was a storyteller with soul in every note. A gifted songwriter and producer, Hutch crafted music that didn't just sound good, it meant something. His early solo records earned quiet praise, but with albums like Fully Exposed and Color Her Sunshine, his genius became undeniable. His voice was silk, his lyrics a reflection of the struggles and hopes of his time. Yet, while his songs spoke of love and resilience, a silent battle raged behind the scenes. By the early 1990s, whispers spread among friends that Hutch's recurring pneumonia was only part of the story, that he had been quietly living with HIV, a secret carried since the wild Los Angeles nights of the 1970s. On September 19, 1992, in Dallas, Texas, the music world lost a poet of truth and tenderness. Willie Hutch was only 48, but his voice still echoes through the soul of every note he ever touched. Melvin Franklin, the soul behind the sound. Born David Melvin English, but forever known as Blue, his deep velvet bass became the heartbeat of Motown. As a founding member of the Temptations, Franklin wasn't just part of the music, he was the foundation it stood on. His voice could shake the walls, yet behind that booming sound lived a man fighting a silent war. In 1968, doctors diagnosed him with rheumatoid arthritis, a relentless pain he battled with cortisone shots just to keep performing. Each injection let him sing another night but slowly tore at his body, weakening his immune system. By the 1980s, diabetes joined the fight. forcing him to carry oxygen tanks on tour just to make it through each song. Then came 1995. While recording for Lovers Only, his bandmates noticed blood seeping through his sock, a small wound that whispered of something far worse. Within weeks, his body gave out. On February 17th, he slipped into a coma. 6 days later, on February 23rd, the world lost its bass heartbeat. Melvin Franklin was only 52. His voice was eternal, but his pain was human. He sang through agony, lived for harmony, and left a silence that still echoes. What are your thoughts on Melvin Franklin's heartbreaking end, and who do you think deserves to be remembered next? Would you like me to make this version sound? Irish Grinstead was the radiant heart of one of the most beloved girl groups of the 1990s. Born in Las Vegas in 1981, she shared an inseparable bond with her twin sisters, Orish and Lemisha. Together with their friend Camila Williams, they formed the R&B trio 702, named after their city's area code, and took the world by storm with their smooth harmonies and chart-topping hits. Their voices defined an era of soul and sisterhood. But while 702's fame soared, Irish began to drift quietly out of the spotlight. Health struggles forced her to step back from touring and recording, a move that confused fans who adored her bright smile and gentle spirit. Behind closed doors, however, she carried a devastating secret. As a teenager, Irish had received a blood transfusion after a terrible accident. Years later, doctors told her that the blood had been contaminated. She was HIV positive. The news shattered her world. Over time, her health declined. Fatigue, weight loss, and painful bruising became her daily reality. In April 2008, at just 27 years old, Irish Grinstead passed away in a Las Vegas hospital. The official cause was listed as kidney failure, but those who loved her knew the truth. Complications from AIDS had claimed the life of a woman whose voice once lifted millions. She left behind music that still echoes, and a story that reminds us how fragile even the brightest stars can be. Eazy-E, the man the streets called Compton's own, wasn't just a rapper, he was a revolution in motion. The mastermind who turned West Coast rap into a movement and gangster rap into a cultural storm. As the fearless leader of NWA and the engine behind Ruthless Records, he gave a voice to the unheard, raw, unapologetic, and real. But behind the gold chains and street swagger, fate had a cruel twist waiting. On February 24, 1995, Eric Wright, the man behind the legend, was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles with a relentless cough. The truth hit like a bullet: HIV/AIDS. Weeks later, on March 16th, he shocked the world, standing before cameras to admit his diagnosis. Doctors said he'd likely contracted the virus from a sexual partner. In those final, fleeting days, Eazy made peace with his old rival Ice Cube and penned an emotional goodbye to his fans. But time wasn't on his side. On March 26, 1995, just 1 month after his diagnosis, the godfather of gangster rap took his last breath, only 30 years old. So now that you've heard it all, tell me, who do you think was the very first name on this list? David Peaston was born in 1957 in St. Louis, Missouri, into a home where music was more than sound, it was a way of life. His mother, Martha Bass, was a gospel powerhouse whose voice could shake the walls of any church, and his sister, Fontella Bass, gave the world the timeless classic, Rescue Me. With music running through his veins, David's own voice soared, rich, soulful, and destined for greatness. But just as the world began to recognize his extraordinary gift, tragedy intervened. In the early 1990s, David was diagnosed with HIV, a revelation that carried not only physical pain but also the heavy shadow of public stigma. Despite the whispers, he refused to let illness define him. Even as complications from diabetes and AIDS later forced him to use prosthetic legs, his spirit never faltered. He kept singing, pouring every ounce of strength into his music. On February 1, 2012, at just 54 years old, David Peaston passed away peacefully at his mother's home in St. Louis. His story is one of brilliance, courage, and heartbreak, a haunting reminder of how deeply stigma once silenced even the most beautiful voices. Which of these legendary names surprised you the most? Do you think the fear and shame surrounding AIDS contributed to the loss of so many incredible artists? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Click on the next video, you won't want to miss it.